One of the features that really sets PowerPivot apart from regular Excel pivot tables is the DAX language for performing calculations. As you learned in the preceding pivot tables course, it is possible to create calculated fields for regular pivot tables, but these are totally outclassed by the possibilities offered by the DAX language. In the area of data analysis, learning DAX might be one of the best things you can do to increase your value in the workplace. As one DAX and PowerPivot expert, Rob Colley, states in the foreword to his book, PowerPivot Alchemy, business intelligence consulting firms have started to specifically target people who know DAX. As in, if you know PowerPivot, you are their ideal candidate. Doesn't matter whether you were a business intelligence professional yesterday or not, just that you know PowerPivot. This video provides an overview of DAX, or data analysis expressions. It will be followed by several videos that explain the details. DAX is built around formulas and functions, some very similar to Excel formulas and functions, and some with no Excel counterparts. There are actually well over 100 DAX functions in all. With this huge number of functions and the many ways they can be used, some quite tricky and non-obvious, a complete coverage of DAX would require more videos than you have time to view. I will try to cover the high points. Then if you want more, you can read a book like Rob Colley's, or you can visit PowerPivot Help. You must first understand that DAX formulas can be used for two purposes: to create calculated columns and to create calculated fields. An example will help to clarify the distinction between them. Here is the PowerPivot data model you have seen in other videos in this series. I will first create a calculated column in the sales table. It will be net revenue, defined as sales amount minus total cost. Watch carefully how I do it. I will select a cell in the first blank column, type an equal sign, and then point to field name labels. Other than the required square brackets, this looks just like an Excel formula, but note that cell addresses don't appear. Only table names and column labels are allowed. When I press Enter, the entire column fills. And then I can rename the column. Later on, I can use this new column in a pivot table just like any other column. Note that there are 33,565 rows in this table. PowerPivot has to calculate net revenue for each of these rows, which is a critical distinction between a calculated column and a calculated field. Basically, a calculated field is any summarization that can be placed in the values area of a pivot table. By the way, if you have used PowerPivot for Excel 2010, you will probably remember that calculated fields were previously called measures. However, only the terminology has changed. Measures in 2010 and calculated fields in 2013 are the same thing. There are two equivalent ways to create a calculated field. First, you can do it in Data View of the PowerPivot window. Make sure the calculations area is visible. Then in a blank cell in this area, start by typing the name of the measure, followed by colon equals, and then the formula. I will use this method to create a calculated field called Total Net Revenue, the sum of the net revenue column. The DAX formula is an easy one. It uses the DAX sum function, and when I start typing sales, I see all the fields in the sales table, including my net revenue calculated column. Finally, I can right-click this cell and select Format to provide the format I want in pivot tables. I'll delete this calculated field and show an alternative way of creating it. Back in Excel, I will click the Calculated Fields drop-down on the PowerPivot ribbon and select New Calculated Field. This opens the Calculated Field dialog box. I need to select a table to associate this field with, a name for the field, an optional description, and a formula for the field. Again, I can choose a format. This method automatically places the new field in the values area of the pivot table if there is a pivot table. In any case, either of these two methods creates a calculated field that becomes part of the data model, not of any particular pivot table. That is, the calculated field can be used in any pivot table based on this data model. An important aspect of calculated fields is that they are calculated only when they are required in the pivot table. For example, if I drag year to the pivot table, the calculated field needs to be calculated only for the values you see here. Contrast this with the calculated net revenue column that had to be calculated over 33,000 times when it was created. This video gets you started. Now you can watch the companion videos, creating calculated columns in DAX and creating calculated fields in DAX to learn more. Then you can watch the more advanced DAX videos in this series to become more proficient with DAX. You can be assured that it will be time well spent.